I've never done this before, and I'm super excited to try something new. Recently, I have become very interested in the world of fermentation. It all started, of course, with baking sourdough bread. I realize how important fermenting foods and how good that is for your gut. I'm going to explore the world of fermenting cabbage, which means we are going to be making some sauerkraut today. It's all coming full circle right now. Being a Floridian, a Florida gardener, I will admit that growing certain things such as cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli are a little bit of a challenge for me. So when I do grow these crops successfully, it's something that I really appreciate, and we savor those particular vegetables because it's hard. It's definitely a challenge, and I think that's definitely one of the reasons why gardening is has such an appeal to me, because of the challenge at hand. I have myself some successful heads of cabbage. I don't want any of them to go to waste. This year what I did with my cauliflower is I froze it all in vacuum sealed bags so I wouldn't waste any of it. And it really is going to feel great to have cauliflower in the freezer and to have sauerkraut ready to enjoy from our garden, and then later have tomato sauce ready to enjoy. So it's something that I'm learning every year, and we're having more and more food staples from our garden, which is like an absolutely excellent feeling. I've got my handy harvest platter and my little garden hacksaw. I purchased this on Amazon recently and I absolutely love it. It's like a really great little tool. Next I'll probably get like a machete, but this is really good for harvesting crops that have a really big root system. I'm here with my Savoy cabbage. I am so proud of this cabbage. I absolutely love it. It's so beautiful. I love the texture of the Savoy cabbage. We also have, I think it's called the Copenhagen cabbage. I called it like a German cabbage before. This looks like a beautiful, just perfect head of cabbage that you'd find at the grocery store, so I'm really proud of it. This would actually be a really good option to make cabbage rolls with, so I might actually keep this one, set it aside to do that. Right here I have this beautiful head of red acre cabbage. Now of course this would be great for chopping up very finely for any type of like a cabbage salad, a topping for like your tacos, anything like that. There's so many different things that you can do with cabbage. You can also make the red variety into sauerkraut as well. So that is definitely what I will be doing with this particular head. I take off some of the exterior leaves and I give these to my chickens. You could put them in your compost. I suppose you could eat them. They're not going to be as tender as the inner head of cabbage. So I just pull off some of those, and that's going to be great food for my chickens. Right here is my Copenhagen patch of cabbage, and then right next to it I have another patch of red acre cabbage. I also have red acre cabbage in the long rows and then some sporadically in some of my raised beds. The Copenhagen cabbage is definitely starting to bolt, so those would be ideal candidates for sauerkraut. This is a sign of bolting where it's starting to separate. I would definitely say this is enough cabbage for what I need to accomplish today. There's still so much cabbage in the garden, which is a good problem to have. Let's get inside and start having fun working with this cabbage. As I was walking inside, I noticed this giant zucchini that is definitely ready to harvest. If you leave a zucchini alone for like literally 2 days, it goes from, you know, a small zucchini to a gigantic zucchini. I purchased a few different fermenting accessories to make my life a little bit easier for this project, and I did make a mistake. Thankfully, I do have one large mouth jar because what I purchased was a large mouth lid by accident that has a little hole right here, and you would put this little fermenting gadget in to help you so that you don't have to burp the sauerkraut constantly. Now, if you don't want to buy one of those, one of these types of things, and you don't plan on doing that, you certainly do not have to do it. You don't even need a jar like this. You can just use any type of, I would say, glass container. I'm sure you could use plastic to ferment your sauerkraut. But if you are using a jar, like an actual glass jar with a lid, definitely make sure that you are burping that every day. Otherwise, you are unintentionally creating a bomb because all of that gas will continue to build up, and it's either the jar is going to explode or it's going to just kind of pop up, and we don't want any of that nonsense. First things first, I'm just going to start by trimming up all of my cabbage heads. Don't worry, these leaves won't go to waste. And I'm just gonna get down to the heart of the cabbage. Can you believe how absolutely beautiful and vibrant this red acre cabbage is? I'm going to run outside and give my chickens all of these little scraps. They're gonna absolutely love it. I'm not even gonna chop it up. They know what to do and how to get it all taken care of. I picked out my sauerkraut cabbage. So we're just gonna cut up the cabbage first. And before we get started on the sauerkraut portion of this video, I just want to say a quick disclaimer. I am not a nutritionist, doctor, scientist, nor do I claim to be. So I'm just coming from a beginner standpoint, making this video for entertainment purposes. Definitely do your research on the whole fermentation process before getting started. Next, I'm just cutting this very, very thin as humanly possible with a knife. I'm using a kitchen scale today, but you certainly don't need a kitchen scale if you don't have one, just to weigh out the amount of salt that I'll need. And now make sure that you're using real salt, and I'll get more into that later. We're not going to be using any type of iodized salt. I am doing 2%, anywhere from 2 to 2.25% salt by weight to the amount of cabbage that I have. Now, if you don't have a kitchen scale, no problem. You can do 2 teaspoons of salt to about a pound of cabbage. So I guess you kind of have to know how much a pound is, but that's pretty much the ratio that you're working with there. I would recommend getting a kitchen scale if you're going to be doing like sourdough and fermentations and things like that, because it really is only going to help you in the long run. Barely touching this cabbage is making my hands all dyed. Beautiful, perfect cabbage. I am just absolutely loving this because I have attempted to grow cabbage many times before. And last year I did grow some cabbage, just a few heads of cabbage. And the years before that, they would always be really, really small heads of cabbage. They wouldn't even form a head. They were just kind of like these sporadic. I probably planted them like the wrong time of the year. That's why with especially the climate that we live in, it's really important to have your timing right for cold weather loving crops. If you live in, like, I would say zone 7 through 10, or at least zone 8 through 10. I'm in zone 9, so it gets extremely hot here. It's already been in the 90 degrees some days as early as March. It hasn't been raining that much lately, which, where's my April showers? I start all of my longer season cold weather crops in September, around late September through early October. At least start the seeds in September and then be ready to transplant them outside in October. That's generally the schedule that I go by. That way, most of the extreme heat is done. September is definitely the cherry on top. That's the end of the super, super hot months, I would say, in Florida. October it's not until October where we start to have our first relief from the heat. And you don't want to freak out, your transplants. And you could probably even plant them as late as November, I would say. So our whole growing season is a little bit different living in Florida. You've got different rules to play by.
Figuring out the amount of salt you'll need is as simple as weighing your cabbage out in grams and timesing that number by 0.02. Then you'll know exactly how much salt you'll need for the recipe.
The type of salt that you use to ferment your food is important. I don't have an elaborate knowledge on that. However, I do know that you don't want to use iodine salt. I don't know the exact scientific reason, but I mean, personally, I don't really even cook with iodized salt or anything like that ever in my house. We typically only buy really coarse kosher salt, and typically I use that mostly for scrubbing my cast iron pans. And secondly, we use Redmond's real salt. This is ancient sea salt. It's pink salt, and it is mined from, I believe, in Utah. It's mined in America, which is super cool. If you're going to start the fermenting journey, definitely go out of your way to get some real salt. I will include a link for this below to Amazon because I did purchase these ones from Amazon, but you can also go on Redmond's website and get it in bulk and, save a few bucks there. Now that I have my salt measured out, all I'm going to do is just simply sprinkle it over the top, and we're going to give each one of these bowls of cabbage a very deep tissue massage. You're really trying to work out all of the water and moisture. It's going to take, I would say, around 5 minutes of just really working it, like as if you're kneading dough or something of that nature.
What happens during the salt and cabbage massaging process is you're creating a brine. Now, this brine is really important to help with the fermentation process and keep your sauerkraut from molding. So you'll want to massage it thoroughly for at least 5 minutes, or you can allow it to sit for about an hour. Basically, you'll want to see that those brine juices are flowing out of the cabbage. Now, if you squeeze it very tightly and it is dripping with brine, good job, it's time for the can. Next, grab your jar of choice and start filling her up. It's very important you use some type of a pickle packer or a muddler to tightly pack your veggies, your cabbage under the brine. And when I say tightly, I mean the goal is to pack the cabbage so tight that there is no air. Beneficial bacteria thrive in an anaerobic, airless environment, making it so that those microorganisms that are bad cannot thrive. Once your cabbage has been tightly packed, add a leaf from the actual cabbage to cover the top, making it so those little bits cannot float up to the top, or a piece of plastic wrap. Then grab some type of a weight, which would be a pickle puck. You can find these on Amazon. I will definitely link them below. And you can optionally use this fermentation little gadget, or you can just make sure that you burp your jar every single day. This little gadget makes it so that you don't have to burp it every day. The main takeaway is ensure your sauerkraut or your cabbage is covered with at least a 1/2 inch amount of brine so that none of those little bits are exposed to the air. Now, I had to go back later and create more brine, just a saltwater solution, because this was not cutting it. Make sure that there is some type of a weight on top. Now, this is the sauerkraut after about 2 days. As you can see, it already looks significantly different. Now, you might start to see bubbles after about 2 days or through the entire fermentation process. This is just friendly bacteria that is produced by lactic acid. They are feeding on the sugars produced by the vegetables and creating CO2 gases, which in turn makes those little bubbles. You might also see a little bit of milky white cloudiness towards the top of the brine, which is also normal. This is what my sauerkraut looked like after 10 days on the counter. It was done fermenting, and it has since been living in the refrigerator for us to enjoy at our leisure. It's beautiful, it's tasty, and it was definitely not complicated to make. Now, I do want to say as a disclaimer, I am certainly a beginner. This is my very first time making sauerkraut. I thought it would be fun to show show you guys trying new things, especially in the world of preservation, does not always have to be intimidating. There is a video I watched that had excellent information on this subject, which really helped me when making this video. I will include a link to that below. The next day I made one of my family's favorites, which is cabbage rolls. I am fully aware that typical cabbage rolls are filled with rice. However, I like to fill my cabbage rolls with veggies instead and serve them over a bed of mashed potatoes. That's just what floats my boat. It also gives me another opportunity to use up those garden veggies. This is the zucchini that we just harvested. So I ground up about 2 cups of zucchini and squeezed all of the juices out of that. Don't just toss out that beautiful nutrient-rich zucchini juice. You can either drink it or water your plants with it. My zucchini is just set aside while I start on my cabbage heads. Now you'll want to remove the cabbage core very carefully with a knife and boil them for about 5 minutes. This is going to make it so that peeling the leaves off of the head of cabbage isn't going to be a problem at all. Immediately after you boil them, dip them in an ice bath solution so that they stop cooking essentially, and allow them to cool down while you start working on your beef mixture. I'm using 2 pounds of lean ground beef. However, you can use whatever percent of lean or not lean beef that you like. Another cool thing about this recipe is it uses up eggs, which I am currently swimming in eggs from my chickens. In a large bowl, toss your beef, your eggs, your zucchini, and I'm also adding in some frozen cauliflower from our garden. I made sure to squeeze all the juices out of that, a little bit of onion, and some chopped up garlic, which I used my little handy garlic chopper right here. I will include a link below. All to the same bowl with salt and pepper and mixed thoroughly. At this point, if you were adding in rice instead of veggies, this is when you would add the rice in. The reason I don't add rice is because I like to serve my cabbage rolls over mashed potatoes. So that's just a personal preference. Cover the bottom of a baking dish with tomato sauce. This helps prevent the cabbage rolls from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Then we're getting started on rolling our cabbage rolls. You're going to lay one of the large leaves out flat and cut a little V out where the rib of the cabbage is. This makes rolling it much easier. Fold the sides over and then roll up like a tiny little burrito. Now I'm just filling up my little cabbage rolls one by one. I used a scooper here so that I could have a consistent amount of filling per roll, and there are some cabbage rolls that I actually use 2 leaves instead of just 1. It really is just some of them seemed a little bit weaker or stronger than other leaves, so some of them seemed like they needed 2, but that's at your discretion. Top the rest of the rolls with tomato sauce and bake at 350 degrees for about an hour, covered with a lid. And now if you don't have a pan that has a lid, you can cover this with foil. Making this recipe was really special to me because growing the cabbage was a labor of love. That's something that is definitely not super easy for me to do, as well as the cauliflower that was in that and the zucchini. So it's definitely not lost on me how special it is to enjoy meals with most ingredients sourced from our garden. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and hit subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching.